The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike, back with Sam. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I am feeling relatively optimistic this week about the state of our beloved Phoenix Suns. How are you feeling?
Not bad. We're coming later than we anticipated. I had internet issues at my house, so we're recording this later than we anticipated, but I'm glad we have a lot to talk about, I think, coming into this podcast. At the end of this episode, the last half of this episode, we're going to be joined by our friend Ty Windisch, who hosts a Bucks podcast, to talk about Mike Budenholzer in great detail. We already recorded that. I think it's really great. I highly recommend checking that out. And then we have some KD stuff that we need to get to. I know people who click this podcast already know what we're talking about here, but first, let's quickly mention, since the last time we recorded, it was made official. Bud is the coach of the Phoenix Suns, and he is signing a 5-year deal. $50+ million is how it was described by Shams Charania of The Athletic. Budenholzer is here to stay the new coach of the Suns. We kind of anticipated this when we talked about it last, Sam, but how you feeling?
I am excited. I think, we talked about it on our emergency episode. That was the last main feed pod, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the emergency episode just reacting to the immediate news that they were closing in on Bud? But yeah, I think, like, of all of the candidates who are possibly out there, this is a guy who can actually give this team an identity and in a way that they didn't really have last year. And I'm excited. I think Bud, this is important too, is excited himself as an Arizona native. A lot of people have pointed out this is a homecoming for Budenholzer, who has been a successful coach in the NBA for the past. He's been a successful head coach for the past 10 years. He's been a successful assistant coach, if you include those years, for the past 25 years, 30 years even at this point. Maybe not 30 years, maybe 25. But yeah, Budenholzer gets to come to Arizona, coach some high-octane superstars in Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, and we'll see how it goes. I think the potential for it to all blow up in everyone's face is, of course, high, as is always the case with this team. But there's also a lot of potential to steer the ship in a way that we've been looking for in the post-Vogel era. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think they hired a good coach who's been successful in the past, and I hope they put the right pieces on the team to make sure that this team is successful. And even beyond that, I hope the players are fully bought into whatever the vision of his vision of the team is.
Bingo. And
they work together to make the best possible team. That's the main thing. We're going to talk in great detail about him, including some stuff that we learned about him that I never knew before a little bit later. But before we get to that,
here's some stuff I didn't know.
Yes.
Did you have to look up Holbrook, Arizona, or was that just me as a non-Arizona?
No, I have driven through Holbrook, Arizona. That's
okay. There you go.
In fact, I would say that's most people's experience of Holbrook, Arizona.
It's a drive-through town. Well, I looked it up, and again, as a non-Phoenix, non-Arizona native, I feel like I've gotten pretty good over the years at just committing to memory all of the various Phoenix metro suburbs. I'm really good at the initial kind of ring of Phoenix towns, but I had to look up Holbrook, and I saw that it was 3 hours away from Phoenix. I was like, oh yeah, there's no chance that I was going to know a place like that. He comes from, I think that's sort of what I suspected, Mike. Kind of more rural country out there. Is that what it is?
Yeah, there's a petrified forest, I think, near there, and for some reason, there's a thing in Holbrook where there's like these statues of little dinosaurs that you can drive by. Not necessarily all little. Some of them are pretty big, but they have like a dinosaur theme to part of that town. But it's very small.
That's very cool.
It's mostly gas stations, if I had to guess. And it's actually pretty amazing for him to come out of Holbrook and be successful in the way that he has. And yeah, I've heard in the past that he has said on the record that he's wanted to coach the Phoenix Suns since he was young, and I imagine he grew up watching the Suns a lot, and that's probably where some of his love for basketball came from. So
he's on the record saying, I've dreamed of being fired by the Phoenix Suns since I was a little kid. And now
Kevin Durant killing me. Unhappy Kevin Durant.
And now sometime within the next 5 years, he'll maybe have his wish granted. Congratulations, Mike Budenholzer. Yes, let's move on. Kevin Durant. You got.
I mean,
got
people
the
know
deets.
they're waiting for us to talk about it because it's going to be in the title of this episode. But
Sure.
we just have to talk about, and this was coming, I think, regardless of whether ESPN teed us up to have this conversation or not. But we have to talk about the concept of trading Kevin Durant this offseason and whether or not it makes any sense. The reason we're having this conversation now, instead of sort of setting it up in like an offseason type of biggest questions episode, which I had planned to do at some point before this firing and hiring came out of the blue, not necessarily out of the blue, but this soon. The reason we're talking about it now is Mike Wilbon first went on to ESPN to talk about the Budenholzer hiring. And Mike Wilbon, who is a Phoenix native as well, by the way, lives here, goes to a lot of Suns games, covers the Suns in depth, wrote a great article about Devin Booker, for those who remember, in their finals run, seems to know this team pretty intimately, said that nobody could fix this Suns roster. You know, I think he said Red Auerbach couldn't fix this roster. Greg Popovich couldn't fix this team. Bud is not going to fix this team. He says the roster is fatally flawed, is how he described it. No coach can fix them, and essentially said they need to trade one of the big three, and then said, I know which one I would trade, and then, of course, was too cowardly to say it, or maybe he's saving it for some big ESPN article, but he didn't say it. And then I think Stephen A. Smith went on later to say, Mike Wilbon wouldn't say this, but... And then he went on to attack KD. He said
Mike Wilbon is a coward, but...
Mike Wilbon is a coward, but I'm not.
And
he
in classic
said KD,
Stephen A. fashion, too, you know, kind of...
KD is a
like
problem.
pastor.
That's
Sure.
how he said it. KD is a problem. He said he's not happy. People around the league say he's not happy. It's something that is the way that he is. Maybe he's not happy on the Suns. There's a lot of Stephen A. Smith isms in here. You know, this is the guy who also said that maybe Devin Booker wants to play in New York. Like, we all know you have to take a little bit of what he's saying with a grain of salt. We all know that. But I do think that there is a situation that the Suns are in right now where the question of whether or not it would be wise to trade Kevin Durant now is at least something that you have to approach. And you know, from our perspective, as somebody who's going to do a podcast every week of this offseason, it's definitely something we're going to talk about. I do want to explain why, but I want to just say from the top, and I'm curious if you agree with this. I just want to say they're not going to, right?
That's interesting. I didn't expect you to lead off with that question. Yeah, I guess probably 95% chance they don't. Speaking of cowards, if we want to accuse anyone of being a coward, I think there's a sunk cost fallacy at work here with the Suns of fearing that they're just too far in to the experiment and that they've risked too much in terms of assets, and they are going to dig themselves deeper this summer, potentially by trading their remaining draft picks to try and build a workable core around this big three. And they're not going to want to try and get out of it. Yeah, so I think that's fine. I think the Stephen A. portion is important to not gloss over here, though, because two things can kind of be true. One being, I don't believe a damn word that comes out of Stephen A.'s mouth. So it's not the fact that this is a report from Stephen A. that, means that I've started to think about, should the Suns trade Kevin Durant or should the Suns trade Bradley Beal if they could, which we know they can't really. I've already been having those conversations and kind of tossing over those ideas in my head. Stephen A. has nothing to do with it. He's just there to do his typical thing and say whatever people will react to and click on and et cetera. But yeah, it's like Stephen A. can be wrong. He can be dead wrong about this, and the Suns could still have a problem on their hands, which is kind of interesting.
He said that Kevin Durant went a month without talking to his head coach. That's one of the things he said. Now, I understand when people... So there are a certain portion of the people listening to this right now that are saying, that's Stephen A. Smith, who cares what he said? And I think that's fair. And I agree with you, Sam, that I think it probably doesn't come from nowhere entirely. You know, sometimes I think a lot of these guys get something from an executive on another team that doesn't actually know, but is just saying something, and they feel like that's enough of a source to say it on the air. Like his Knicks thing, it probably came from someone at the Knicks.
There's
right?
no, I mean,
Devin
just
Booker,
remember,
you know?
Mike, there's no system of accountability for a guy like Stephen A. Like ESPN pays him, he's one of their highest paid employees, if not their highest paid, specifically to spin bullshit like this. So it's not the fact that it's coming from Stephen A. that means we should take it seriously.
But we do have to talk about what we're looking at here, right?
Yeah,
we're looking at a 35-year-old Kevin Durant that'll be 36-year-old next season. He has 2 years left on his deal. $51 million and $54 million in those 2 years. 6 coaches since he's left the Golden State Warriors. 2 postseason victories for Kevin Durant. Is Kevin Durant a problem on the Suns? I would not say that. Like, I'm not going to do the ESPN thing. But the Suns just got swept in the first round of the NBA playoffs with 3 quote-unquote stars on their team. What happens if something similar happens next year? That's what we have to take seriously. And here's why we have to take that seriously. Because if you are in a situation next year when you trade Kevin Durant, you are trading a 36, about to be 37-year-old Kevin Durant with 1 year, $54 million left on his deal. Not a great situation for the Suns to be in. So the question is, if the Suns are in a situation where maybe they're not going to win a title next year anyway, would it be prudent? Would it be wise to pull that plug early and try to trade Kevin Durant now to maximize whatever value he has left?
Recoup as many assets as you could, essentially, and extend the title window because Devin Booker is still only 27. And by the way, this is not about Devin Booker versus Kevin Durant in terms of who's the better player. It's not about that. It's just about Kevin Durant is 35 and Devin Booker is 27. And if you continue to build around one guy, you're going to have more cracks at it. That's really all it is.
Yeah.
I think it makes perfect sense, and that's why I would look to trade him this summer, personally. But a couple things are important. One, you need Book's approval. You can't just go about it without having his buy-in. And I think that's tough. I think that's really tough. You also need KD's approval.
You probably need need KD's approval, too.
Because remember, when he forced his way here, there was a wish list of one team. He wanted to come to the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah.
And that was it. And how excited were we that we were the only team on his wish list so that he could force his way here. And all we had to give up, supposedly, was 2 role players in Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and then all our picks from now until death. So, yeah, you need KD's buy-in to this idea. You need Book's buy-in to this idea. But if I may, before we even get into like the tangible, what are the teams, whatever, times like this are where KD's, like we criticize KD's lack of leadership or whatever, just the fact that he isn't a very vocal guy. But it's a time like now where it would be really, really nice to just have him come out on the record and say something in response, like specifically to the Stephen A. report. Or just like more in general, like more about kind of all of these criticisms that are being levied towards him. And you could argue, and you would be very fair to do so, it's not his job to respond to whatever the media is saying about him. It's not his job to respond to what fans are saying about him, right? He's not contractually obliged to do any of that. And you'd be right. But when you're a guy as important to the history of basketball, to the NBA, as Kevin Durant is, and you allow other people to sort of speak for you in your absence and kind of guess at what it is you want, because you won't actually come out and tell us what you want, it creates this miscommunication gap. And that's where a lot of these sort of falsified reports are coming from. And the problem is, we can kind of guess at it, Mike, you and I, but none of us know from an outside angle, what does Kevin Durant actually want? How does Kevin Durant actually want to play? Just in the past few years, we had reports coming out at the end of the Golden State tenure saying, oh yeah, this whole Steve Kerr motion offense thing, Kevin Durant doesn't want to play a motion offense. Okay, fine. Suns get eliminated this year in the first round. We get a report within 5 minutes from Shams Charania saying, oh, Kevin Durant, he doesn't want to play a pick and roll heavy offense. Oh, Kevin Durant, he doesn't want to stand in the corner. Kevin Durant, he doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to do that. What does he want to do? I need the answer from him. What do you want to do? How do you want to play? Because if it's true that you don't want to play a motion offense, you don't want to stand in the corner, you don't want to watch your guards run a bunch of pick and rolls, what's left? There's one thing that I can think of that's left, and it's mid-range iso ball. And I don't want to believe that that's the only style of basketball that Kevin Durant actually wants to play. But let's take the leap for a second and say that it is true. If that is the only style of basketball you're comfortable playing, well, that just doesn't win you a championship in 2024, 2025. It just doesn't. You can't win that way.
It's only won 2 playoff series, and I know there's been injuries that have impacted that, but
I just want to know what he's willing
yeah.
to buy into is my thing. Before we actually go all aboard on the let's trade him bandwagon, which I think is fine. Team recoup assets, I get it. But Kevin Durant, you got to give me something. What are you looking for? Is Phoenix just like a warm place to retire and ride it out into the sunset?
Yeah.
Or like, do you want to win? Are you serious about this?
And in very Kevin Durant fashion, the closest thing that we got to a response was a tweet that was deleted within seconds of it being posted, of him replying to the Stephen A. Smith report with just an LOL, and then very quickly deleted, which doesn't say much. And look, and I do think that it is not his job. I agree with that it's not his job to respond. But I understand why some Suns fans would be frustrated in having this kind of conversation with just being unsure of that. Let's talk about the idea of him being traded. And actually, let's just first say that I'm not necessarily on the team of not trading. I'm not necessarily on the team of trading him. Like, I'm not fully bought into that idea. But I do think the Suns waited a year too late with DeAndre Ayton. Maybe 2 years too late with DeAndre Ayton. And the value that they could have gotten had they traded him earlier would have been a lot higher. And maybe there's a lesson to learn with that. And yes, there is a scenario where these guys sort of get to choose their next team. But, that was the case with Chris Paul for a while, too. And then it wasn't. He was traded to the Wizards, and then he was traded to the Golden State Warriors. So I think first place we should start. And then I want to just list some teams. We could make up some fake trades if you want. I don't have any specific fake trades listed right now. Because I think we need to talk about this conceptually more.
I would just remind the listeners, this is the time of every season. If you're an off-season listener of the podcast, you need to expect us to be in our bag. What does that mean? It means we get dumber. It means we get more entertaining, but we also get dumber. So just roll with the punches and don't get mad at it. Don't get mad at every trade proposal. We're gonna sling some BS around because that's how summer works on this pod. I need to stay sane.
We record
multiple
want.
Podcasts a week.
That's what they want, Sam.
I know. 90% of them do want it, but then the other 10% still get mad. I'm just saying, don't get mad.
They want to get mad. That's the other part that they want. But yes.
So yeah, I mean, look, we'll probably do pods later with like more concrete trade ideas. These ones we're just going to be going off the dome. So hit me with what you got in terms of teams.
Well, first let's say this. Here's where I want to start. If Kevin Durant were to be traded, we'll just start from this. Okay, Kevin Durant's going to be traded. What should be the goal for the Suns at this point? There's a couple of options for a goal for the Suns. One, get under the second apron. You could just throw that out there as an option. I don't really care about that necessarily. Does it free up some potential deals that could be made in the future? Yeah, I think it's one that you just got to throw out there. Two, get a superstar or a star player back. That's another option, right? That's something that we could just mention and say that, if that's an option, that should be available to the Suns, maybe, depending on the teams that are out there. Three, I think this is the asset one. A combination of picks and playable players.
Smattering
whether they
of
be
role players and
role players or young players that could develop into better players, but maybe aren't necessarily viewed as a potential future star, right? That would be the other option.
Maybe the best option, just off the top of my head, is that one. And it's easily the hardest to sell Devin Booker on.
Right.
I think Zach Lowe gave this spiel already in a recent episode. I can't remember exactly who he was talking to, but it's like, he was like, give me a player who I can sell if I'm James Jones. I can sell to Devin Booker as being like, yeah, okay, we're trading your buddy Kevin Durant, but we're still competing next year. Don't worry. Like, that's the challenge. Is if we're gonna trade for role players, okay, but they better be some pretty damn good role players, at least, or like, you know, guys who are 24, 25 years old that maybe you can like grow in to reserve all-star types or even all-star type players down the road, because you can't just trade KD for, I don't know, a bunch of Grayson Allen or Torrey Craig types or something and be like, look, Devin Booker, we got you depth. We got you role play. Like, that's not going to make him happy.
Yeah. And look, I think it would be difficult in general. Like, because what if the ceiling for this team next year, and I'm not saying it is. I mean, I have time to talk myself into this team throughout this offseason. I'll probably feel better once we're recording the over-unders with Max at some point in the offseason. But
that's
what if the
6
ceiling
months
for this
away
team,
or 5 months away? So we've got a lot of
what
potting
if the
till
ceiling
then.
for this team is like a second-round exit next year? Are there versions of trading KD that also gives you the ceiling of a second-round exit but gives you more flexibility in the future? That, I think, is the concept that I'm sort of looking at.
You know what else is kind of interesting to think about? And this is where people might really get mad at me, but I'm going to say it anyway. Are there versions where you trade KD for a bunch of role players and you have the same second-round exit ceiling, but also you're just more fun to watch?
Yeah.
Because
I understand that.
You look at the Knicks right now, and Knicks fans, they're currently up 20 points over the Pacers in the fourth quarter right now. They're about to win Game 5. No guarantee they win this series, obviously. But they just have one star player and a bunch of role players. And does that mean that they can, you know, to take the next step, maybe they're going to have to move on from their Villanova guys eventually and have the conversations about who do they acquire next to really push them into championship contention? Maybe they're going to be having all those conversations if they get bounced in the second round or the conference finals this summer. But also, right now, everyone's just enjoying the ride because they're a team that's more than the sum of their parts, and they're really fucking fun to watch, and everyone has a role, and everyone executes that role at a high level.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating as a Suns fan for the past year and a half to watch a team that's the absolute inverse of that, where it's not the more than the sum of their parts, it's they're supposed to be really good, and they just can't amount to it.
Yeah. The other thing is, I mean, outside of trading Devin Booker, which I guess we could have an episode about should the Suns trade Devin Booker at some point in the offseason if somebody else makes up a potential rumor on that one. But Kevin Durant is the guy that could potentially want to play somewhere else as early as in the middle of this next season or the end of next season anyway. So he is the guy that could be the one that could return you as much assets as you could possibly recoup. And it would just be pulling the plug on whatever trades that you made before that. And look, if they end up trading this year's pick plus the 2031 pick to try to make this team better, and then they pull the plug, well, you know, whatever. Sometimes you got to pull that plug and change what you're doing. You don't want to be doing it too late. I doubt, like I said, I don't think any of this will happen. I doubt this front office has learned that kind of lessons. If you watched their press conference that they had at the end of the season, there's just nothing that was said there that makes me think they're going to try to trade anyone on this team of that big three. You know, maybe they put a Beal feeler out there, but we know Bartlestein is the CFO.
A Beal feeler
I have
to
a
who?
list of
who yearns to be to take on that much dead cap is my question. But yeah, give me your list.
I have 7 teams.
Wow, good for you.
I have 7 teams that could potentially be interested in Kevin Durant. The one thing I didn't think of before this is if there are 2 teams trying to trade together that are in the second apron, it is essentially impossible to make that trade unless the money is exact. So
yeah,
good luck figuring that out.
One of the second apron stipulations are you can't aggregate contracts. And you can't trade for $1. I mean, there's more to it than this, but these are the important ones. You can't aggregate contracts, and you can't trade $1 over. Like you used to be able to salary match up to 110% of the other team's outgoing value. You can't do that when you're in the second apron. So yeah, if there's 2 teams, that's a really interesting point that I think we're just not going to see any teams who are both in the second apron really trading with each other. And if
maybe at all, yeah.
And if a third of the league is in the second apron, that's kind of a disaster for the league, right? Just
it was
another
a bad
example,
CBA.
Just another example of CJ McCollum and Grant Williams really fucking up.
Okay, so here are the teams. And we can talk about them individually. Let me list them first, and then I'll see which one stands out to you. OKC.
Classic.
The Golden State Warriors.
Classic.
The Los Angeles Lakers.
Yep.
The Miami Heat.
Yep.
The Philadelphia 76ers, and that's a potential save you from a potential save you from the second apron team. They have a ton of cap space. Boston, if they fail.
Ugh.
I don't know. Drew Holiday would be kind of fun. Okay, and the Knicks. And we just talked about the Knicks.
Big
Maybe
markets.
We'll make them less fun.
Big markets who want to make
big markets and OKC.
Yeah, New York. Give me fucking Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo right now, and I do not care. I don't care. But they would never go for it. If you propose right now, how funny is it that if you propose to any Knicks fan right now, Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo for Kevin fucking Durant, they would say no.
No, in fact, they might, come to your house. Yeah. They'd be pissed. So I know you came up with even potentially a fake trade or two in here.
I didn't think of any of those. Out of those teams, I think those are a lot of classic teams. What are you thinking of for Philly? Talk me through that. I'm going to look up their cap sheet right now. Their salaries.
I think they have three. I believe they have 3 tradable first round picks, and they have, I think, up to a max contract's worth of cap space. So the Suns could.
Oh my God! I did not realize I am not as up to date on the Eastern Conference teams. Obviously, there's always kind of a lagging thing for me. I did not realize how many of these guys are free agents.
Yeah, like
Tobias Harris, Buddy Hield, Nick Batum,
Mm-hmm.
Robert Covington, DeAnthony Melton, all free agents this summer.
Yeah. I mean, like, of course, you look at that team and you say, well, give me Maxey. I mean, you could say give me Embiid, but of course they're not going to trade Embiid. And they wouldn't trade Maxey either. Right? So you'd essentially be saying, we get out of the second apron, we take a few picks back, and maybe, I don't know, what other players do they have under contract since you have that in front of you? There's nothing exciting, right?
They got Paul Reed. Another important thing is I don't think you can sign and trade in the second apron either. I don't think you're allowed to execute. So like, people would like Maxey, if he's a restricted free agent, that's not an option. Yeah. And sign and trades are always way more difficult than people think they're going to be anyway.
Well, we could potentially be out of the second apron. There is a world where that might be allowed, actually. If the Suns were able to structure Maxey's contract, which I don't think this is possible.
Yeah, I think you're basically just trading for cat. This is a Robert Sarver move. You're trading Kevin Durant for picks and the privilege of being out of the second apron. That doesn't do it for me. That's an example of can't really sell Devin Booker on that.
There's just really no version of that. I think that makes a ton of sense. I think they would be interested. If they can come up with a more creative trade that gets the Suns something they want, like a 3-teamer, which I don't know if that's possible, but yeah.
Hold on. Okay, I'm just thinking about the other teams you mentioned, and then I'll throw out a really wacky idea sort of at the end here. OKC, you mentioned OKC. Let's go to them. So another example of a team that I think if you talk to their fans, OKC fans are really mean to Kevin Durant. I get it, but like they would take him back, I think. A lot of them will say to your face that they won't, that they'd rather have Lou Dort and Josh Giddey, but I think they're lying. I think they understand the limitations that
you just brought up who you could potentially trade, right? Because like you could do a trade for Lou Dort, Josh Giddey, Kenrich Williams, basically. And then they could eat the rest of Kevin Durant's contract into their cap space because they also have a lot of cap space.
Yeah, so...
And then they have, that would be a trade where you say... Because you can't trade with OKC without saying give us 8 or 9 picks. They just have so many. You can't... Like, the price in picks that it would take for them to trade for Kevin Durant would be higher than every other team because they have so many.
Yeah, they literally... I really... appreciate what Presti has done there. I think it's genius, and they've got such a crazy, long window, but they have so many picks that it has deflated the value of a pick for them, where they literally just don't have the amount of roster spots. So it doesn't even have to be first round picks for me. I think there's something really funny about the idea of like, OKC, we're going to give you Kevin Durant. You go make your run at a championship with this guy. Give us back a couple playable role players in the playoffs and 10 second-round picks. And let's just see what we can do.
No, you need the first. They have enough first.
You need the
you
first.
Would need first.
Yeah, you need first too. But you could be
let's say 5 firsts. I think that's low to be honest.
You could be like
just
5 firsts and 8 second-round picks and just like have a treasure chest of your own that you've suddenly built up.
Yeah, and then maybe
you could do something
attach
like
a
that.
bunch of those to Nurkic's contract. And if you're under the second apron, you could even try to attach, put 2 guys together with a bunch of those picks to make another trade. Is that exciting? No. And by the way, people will say, why aren't you saying Jalen Williams? Why aren't you saying Chet Holmgren? Because they wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't.
The only reason they would want Kevin Durant is to put him with SGA and Jalen Williams and Chet. That's why they would want him.
I think you're gonna say that this team would never go for it, but can I give my unhinged one?
Sure.
So the NBA lottery took place this weekend since the last time we recorded.
Okay. I won't spoil it. I'm guessing I know where this is going.
To everyone's surprise, the winner of the 2024 NBA lottery was not the San Antonio Spurs, the Washington Wizards, who else was dog shit this year? The Portland Trail Blazers, the Charlotte Hornets, the Detroit Pistons. Detroit Pistons are picking 5th. The new lottery system's really hard.
Sorry to those Pistons.
The winner of the number 1 pick went to a team that is already pretty decent, folks. I mean, they weren't in the playoffs, but they've been in the playoffs recently, and they are the Atlanta Hawks, who are still trying to find a way to build around 25-year-old Trae Young and maybe even 27-year-old DeJounte Murray. I think they're going to split those guys up. They've got a 22-year-old in Jalen Johnson, who just had a hell of a season. They have a future. And they also have the number 1 pick. They have the number 1 pick in a draft that everyone basically considers weak at the top. There's a lot of talent. If you're looking for role players and maybe even starting quality players, later in the mid-first round and later. But everyone is like, this first overall pick, right now, the favorite to go number 1 is yet another Frenchman in Alex Sarr. But everyone, and we're not draft guys, as you all know, but everyone's on the same page. Alex Sarr is no Victor Wembanyama. He has a ton of talent. He has a ton of versatility, but he is a raw number 1 overall pick who would not come in and have the same instant impact that a guy like Victor Wembanyama has. That being said, a number 1 overall pick is a number 1 overall pick. Having a guy with that type of potential and 8 years of team control over that player is worth quite a lot. Is it worth Kevin Durant? Would the Atlanta Hawks talk themselves into going for it? You pair Trae Young with Kevin Durant, which I actually think is probably a much better fit than Devin Booker and Kevin Durant.
I think it's pretty interesting, yeah.
And you still have DeJounte Murray on the roster, who you then, if you say these guys can't fit together, you still have, how about this? Clint Capella. What? Why are you laughing? Why are you booing me if I'm right? Clint Capella, DeAndre Hunter, and the number 1 overall pick for Kevin Durant. That's the entire trade.
Can't even get Jalen Johnson in that trade, huh?
No. That's the entire trade. You're getting the number 1 overall pick and 2 role players who can give you 25 minutes in the playoffs. Are they great role players? No. Clint Capella at this point, one of the worst starting centers in the NBA. But he could start.
Yeah.
DeAndre Hunter, he can eat up minutes.
Oh, way overpaid. DeAndre Hunter, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I don't give a shit. You got the number 1 overall pick. You have a guy who, if you get it right, you've extended your window for the next decade. And you got role players for next year.
James Jones frantically Googling mock drafts, trying to figure out
Atlanta talks themselves into Trae Young, KD, and then I think that what they do is they turn around. They've got Jalen Johnson too, and then they turn around and they flip DeJounte Murray for more pieces, and they get more depth. And I think they could talk themselves into that being a contender in the Eastern Conference for a championship next year. I think they could.
I think the Hawks would do that, to be honest. I don't think this draft is something where they would say no. But I don't know that. I don't know that I would do that.
You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that. It's the number 1 pick. It's the number 1 pick.
I'm not excited about these guys in this draft.
Imagine he ends up being Anthony Bennett, and you've traded for Anthony Bennett, DeAndre Hunter, and Clint Capella. But I don't think that's what this is. I don't think that's.
I think you'd have to use that. I almost feel like you'd just be getting that number 1 pick to try to attach to something else for the Suns.
Like make a 3-team trade.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we could talk about too. Make it a 3-team trade. KD goes to Atlanta. The number 1 pick is used for some other rebuilding team that sends more realized assets
for some
to the
player
Suns.
that went to Michigan State. Yeah. Let me throw another one at you. The Golden State Warriors. It would be some version of like Jonathan Kuminga, maybe Pajemski and Moody.
You mean Jonathan Kumunga? Did you? Are you caught up on the Mind the Game pod?
No.
Well, I caught up on it this week. I was a couple episodes behind, but LeBron, obviously, I really appreciate his analysis as always, but he said Jonathan Kumunga a couple of times on one of the recent episodes, which just made me laugh.
And look, I'm not even saying that this would be exciting. I'm just trying to be realistic with what teams would be willing to give up for Kevin Durant.
Sorry, you said
and places
Kuminga.
Where he might be. Yeah,
you said Kuminga and who?
Kuminga, Moody, Pajemski. I don't know.
Okay, so all of their young guys.
Gary Payton the second, like for
all of
salary
their young
purposes.
players.
Unless you want to say, because they don't have Clay next year. He's not currently signed, so there's no Clay. If you need like absolute contract filler, you can put Andrew Wiggins in that trade, I guess, but that's a brutal contract where he signed through 26-27, and I believe that last year is a player option. It is. So it's like, that's something I would try to avoid.
Could Draymond and KD tolerate being in the same locker room again, or would you have to trade them for each other? Like, are they cool?
So you're saying a version of Draymond, Kuminga, Pajemski, or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
It's not the worst.
It's not the worst.
They have 3 first-round picks. That's the other thing I was going to say. They have 3 first-round picks that they could trade. So you'd have to ask for all of those, right? And you'd be trying to just essentially do... It's I don't know. We'll see how people feel about this. I'm sure we're going to get opinions on all of these. Lakers?
You're not going to get
any
shit.
Thoughts?
Actually, well, I almost said you're not going to get at it, and you're not going to get shit out of the Lakers, and I think that's true if you try 1-for-1 trade. But I saw you propose in the Discord a 3-team trade involving the Lakers that I will let you talk about because I actually thought that was interesting. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't think that Kevin Durant would want to go to the Pelicans. That's why the Pelicans were not on the list. But I was trying to figure out a way.
The Pelicans just got bounced in the first round and is another example of a team with high expectations that we are expecting massive roster turnover for.
They would love KD.
Griffin said as much in their post-season presser. He said, look, things are going to change around here. We're going to trade for some stuff.
They would love KD.
Sure.
They just would. Now, when it comes to the fake trade I made, it was just a version of Kevin Durant going to the Pelicans, Brandon Ingram going to the Lakers. The Lakers get a 3rd star. They want a 3rd star. They want somebody who has...
Sure, yep.
That's what they want. They want somebody who can dribble the ball and shoot and create his own shots.
Yeah, he's a 3rd star. He has made an all-star team. He ironically made an all-star team his first year in New Orleans and never again, and he's been in New Orleans 5 years now. But yeah, he's a 3rd star.
The Suns would essentially get a combination of Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, and some version of some wings from the Pelicans. So Pelicans fans who listen to this are going to be furious even mentioning Herb Jones, but like Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, like that would be the best case scenario for the Suns. And
if you traded Kevin Durant for Rui Hachimura, Austin Reeves, Trey Murphy, and Herb Jones, you have made out like bandits. Like if you get all 4, you get 4 playoff wings. Well, I should ask you this.
It's probably not legal next year. There's no trade machine that works for next year yet because the playoffs are still happening. Nobody's updated it. So I'm not
where
exactly
are you?
Sure.
Are you an Austin Reeves guy? Do you like Austin Reeves?
I think Austin Reeves is probably a lower tier starting guard and a top tier bench guard. And I do think if the Suns were to make that trade, that is just a completely fake trade, he'd be your like point guard off the bench, and that would be pretty awesome. Like I actually think he'd be pretty great in that scenario.
Well, it works because he wanted to re-sign in LA, so he took a deal that was worth less than his value. So it works because now you could transition Austin Reeves into your sixth man easily, and he's paid like $12 million a year. He easily exceeds the value of that contract, even if he's not starting. It wouldn't work if he was making $25 million a year, like some people suspected he might last summer when he signed that deal, but that wasn't the deal he took. So yeah, I mean, I like Austin Reeves. I think he's definitely not as good as maybe some Lakers fans think he is. That's just what happens when you play in LA. But Reeves is good. I love Trey Murphy. I mean, Trey Murphy's awesome.
I like him too.
And Herb Jones.
Yeah, I don't think there's no star player there. You know what I mean? Like that would just be that would be like giving it to Bud and saying, "All right, do your Atlanta Hawks thing with this team."
Yeah, and you know what?
Try to raise the ceiling with this team. There's a bunch of playable players who can play in the playoffs. Just do whatever you can. Devin Booker, you better rise to the occasion here. Bradley Beal, please play 60-plus games. Yeah,
he could do it. That's the thing about Bud, is he's a good coach who's done it in the past. If you just gave him those types of role players who have been in critical moments in the playoffs and like are real professionals where you don't question any of their work ethics, Bud could do his thing, and Devin Booker would still be by far the best player on either of those two. Like Devin Booker is still a much better star player than fucking Paul Millsap, who led those Hawks teams in scoring. So Bud could do his thing.
Heat. There's nothing exciting there, huh?
Yeah, I mean, what are we talking about? Duncan
Would you
Robinson?
trade Jimmy Butler for Kevin Durant?
I'm serious. Now we're getting somewhere. I don't think would the Heat do it.
I believe he's up for an extension that they are not signing him to.
So just like straight up KD for Jimmy Butler and picks. Do they have picks?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, let's just say that. Sure.
I'm not. It doesn't excite me because Jimmy is lit.
It's all fake. This is all fake. They're not going to do it. So would you do it?
Jimmy's awesome. I think he's carved out a great career for himself. I'm a fan of his. He's a couple months away from turning 35.
Yeah. Well,
you're not. If we're talking about extending the window, you're not extending the window. So you're trading for an inferior player, and you're not extending the window. It just doesn't make sense.
I just don't think. I like Jimmy Butler a lot. I would not do that personally. I just was scared. I think Jimmy Butler, as far as like potentially solving the quote unquote leadership problem that the Suns would have, he might. Yeah. He's a dog. He's out there yelling at guys. I'm sure he wouldn't. I'm sure Karl Anthony Towns looking at a playoff matchup against the Suns again, and on the opposite side is Jimmy Butler, who is probably who he sees when he sleeps at night. I'm sure that wouldn't hurt. That's all I'm saying. And anyway, we talked about 76ers. We talked about the Knicks. Boston is just one I threw in there because he's been connected to them in the past. I think they run into second apron team problems with Boston if they were to make that trade. But I don't know if you could figure out something where you get, I guess, I don't know, Drew Holiday and something. It's just really difficult to come up with the team there. And the Suns all of a sudden have 3 starting guards.
Give us Al Horford, Bud's ideal starting 5. Al Horford and...
Is Al Horford a free agent? Actually, no. You mentioned that.
No, he makes $9.5 million next year. 37 years old.
Yeah, I mean that would be someone he would love. I agree with you. I mean, I guess what we're saying here, and we're gonna have to answer the question that was posed in the title of this podcast. Is the question ultimately comes down to should the Phoenix Suns trade Kevin Durant? Because the answer to will they, I think, is just a straight up no, unless he asks to be traded, and even then they might not. Should the Phoenix Suns trade Kevin Durant? I think in the best possible way for me to answer that, the answer is still maybe. Because the answer will not be fully told until the end of next season.
Sure.
Because if they're good, then it's just like, okay, great. Like Frank Vogel was the problem, right? You can blame it on him, whatever you want. Obviously, there was more problems than that. Maybe they fixed the rosters in ways that we didn't anticipate them doing. But if they don't fix the roster, if they still don't match as a star pairing, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, if Bradley Beal still doesn't get his shit together and come through in the playoffs when it matters, if they're ousted in the first round again,
there's no one
and they have to trade him then, then, Kevin Durant should have been traded this offseason. That's really what it is. That's the problem that we're staring at. And the question of whether or not you trade Kevin Durant is a question of how much do you believe in this team. So for the people that are listening to this, you know where you stand on this. If you believe they can be a lot better, they'd have to be a lot better, I think, in order for people to remain happy at the end of the season. They'd have to be a lot better by the end of the year. And if you believe they can, then you're probably going to say no. They shouldn't trade him. If you believe that their ceiling is somewhere around the second round, I don't know what to tell you, man. Maybe now's the time.
Yeah, I think that's a really great, succinct way of putting it. I believe in their talent, but that's always sort of been the problem with this team. I believe in their talent, but I'm not sure I believe in their leadership and their ability to adapt to each other and buy in to a system. And if they can't do that, as veterans of the league who are entering their 10th season or 15th season or 18th season, whatever it is for these three guys, then it's never going to happen no matter how talented they are.
Yeah. After this break, we'll be back with our friend Ty talking about the guy who is tasked to figure this out. Somebody who luckily, Sam, is a lot smarter when it comes to basketball than you and I. And hopefully he will figure out a way to make this thing work. So we'll be right back with our friend Ty. All right, joining us, our friend and host of a Bucks podcast called the Eurostep, Ty Windisch. Ty, how you doing?
Doing well. Well, could be doing better. I think Bucks and Suns are kind of in the same boat, but doing well overall and happy to be back on the show.
We were commiserating
it's kind
a little bit before we started.
It's kind of remarkable how much of the same boat we are in. To the extent that both teams were successful in 2021. Obviously, the Bucks slightly more successful. And then both teams recently fired their coaches, got a new coach, and then moved on from that coach. Yeah. And both teams made a massive trade for an aging superstar to try to keep their window for contending open, and then were knocked out of the playoffs in the first round after a full season of that trade. So it is funny. I mean, the very least, you guys have that championship to tide you over. The Suns just lost in that finals and then haven't come close to it since. But it is kind of funny how I do feel a kinship with you right now, Ty, I think.
They're tied together franchises, right? From the very, very beginning of both of them. And, of course, they meet in the finals. The coin flip.
Man, yeah.
The funny thing is, I was down horrendous when Beal went to the Suns. I mean, it felt like the Bucks needed that half-court guy, and I was like, man, he has all the leverage with this no trade. He can really pick where he wants to go. I was manifesting Giannis tampering with him, and I was heartbroken. I was like, oh my God, are they gonna have to go? They have to get DeMar DeRozan, and then suddenly they have Dame, and then everything was great. Then it wasn't. Then it kind of was. Then it really wasn't. And yeah, it's been a rocky road, but I'm glad at least we have each other to fan bases to rely on here during these tough times.
Well, it is interesting.
And now a summer full of Beal trades for us.
And not just Beal trades, many, many, many types of trades. It is kind of interesting. Obviously you guys beat us in the finals, but I never felt that sort of ill will towards Milwaukee as a franchise that I have since felt, to be entirely honest, towards some other franchises that have directly beat us in the playoffs. So it's funny how that works. But we were talking about, these are two second apron teams, Ty. But the extent to which their second apron teams is a little bit different. The Suns, I think, are about 20 million into that second apron. The Bucks are about 3 million, and could maybe have definitely a lot of your avenues to improve as a team, just like us, are taken away this summer. But it seems like you guys have more avenues to potentially dodge the second apron for next summer, if you wanted to. So how are Bucks fans feeling, I guess, their collective psyche right now about the team's ability to improve going forward next year, even as a second apron team right now?
I think pretty good. I mean, there's always that contingent of fans who's they can't improve. Their roster sucks. They have no there's always the doomers, and especially, with the Bucks feeling like they haven't had many picks since they made the Drew trade back in 2020. There's always this kind of sense of when they don't win it all, it's like, oh, how are they ever going to get better? They typically find ways, though. I mean, I think a lot of franchises do, especially if you already have the stars. And I do think the majority of kind of the Bucks fan spear right now is kind of they don't need a ton. I think that's the consensus. It's they need a roster that fits better, but Giannis doesn't play at all in the playoffs. You got to stay healthy, and that's kind of just an ethereal thing that no one can directly control. You can do things to help with that, but that's a different story. But Chris Middleton looked really, really good. Dame looked very good when he was, had most most both legs under him in the playoffs. So I do think there's kind of a sense of just like they need more time together. They need to just play on the court together, and they need stability, which they haven't had. The Bucks made their coach move just recklessly mid-season, and it I don't think it threw away their season, but it really made it hard to be a cohesive team throughout the year. So I think the vibe right now is kind of like, let's get some better fits. We don't need to make the knockout trade this year. I don't think everyone wants more stars, right? But I don't think that's going to be the Bucks thing. I think it's going to be more, can we find like a Derrick Jones Jr. to complement these guys better? Can we get Giannis and Dame on the same page? They're going to be hanging out this summer, they've already both said. So I think overall, everyone knows, your window's never as open as it seems, and the Bucks are old. We all know this stuff, and there's probably going to be some tough moves with some, guys from that championship team on the way out, just as a necessary reality this summer. But I think overall, people feel pretty good about the core and just think it's about refining it now.
Now, Doc Rivers is now your coach. This is funny, kind of a tangent here. I have a coworker that's from Wisconsin. He's a massive Bucks fan. And for the last year, he's been telling me the Bucks should have never fired Bud. The Bucks should have never fired Bud. And he keeps saying that to me. And then when the Suns, because he's here in Phoenix, when the Suns hired Bud, he was very excited for the Suns. He said it was a good hire. Now, where are you at? Now, of course, we're going to center this conversation around Coach Bud and talk about him. Where are you at with your feelings about Doc Rivers and about the whole coaching carousel that transpired in the last year and a half for the Bucks, which was, it's bizarre. It's a bizarre thing for a team to do, especially in the midst of making a massive trade. In some ways, maybe the Suns should have done it earlier, like you did.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Getting rid of Frank Vogel in November or whenever it was that Adrian Griffin was fired. But how are you feeling about the coaching situation right now?
Better than right in the aftermath of the Griffin. I was one of the ones who actually, I thought he was doing okay, but then I think like some of the moments that felt good for Griffin were like, some late game coverage, changing up that really worked for the Bucks or things like that. And then the story comes out after he gets fired, which took me by total surprise, that like, he didn't call some of these things. The team just like freelanced and did it in the games. So they thought it would work better. And I was like, okay, yeah, he had to go. You can't, that's untenable. You can't have a coach of a veteran team that's supposedly a contender and they just don't listen to him. Like that's obviously not going to work out.
Sounds familiar.
Think, unfortunately, I think a lot of teams can relate, Phoenix being one of them. And I think Doc, for all I'm thinking, the obvious Doc stuff, right? That's not going to happen. I think Doc is boisterous on and off. I don't know, court, sideline, on and off sideline, and media for sure. And he's got to stop. I wish he would stop doing interviews. I know he won't. I know it's not in him. I saw he was on Stephen A. again, and as much as I enjoy people talking shit to JJ Redick, I was like, man, do we need to do more interviews right now? Can we at least let the season sit for a little while more? But he's an orator. I can't hold it against him.
It's just it's just a shame that there isn't a coaching job for JJ to take, like in your guys' division right now, because that would be a really fun rivalry to have JJ and Doc go at each other 3-4 times a year would be fun.
It would be great. I don't think, is Monty really sick of this? Could he go coach them? I don't know if JJ would even want that job, to be honest. But anyway.
Well, supposedly he's the front runner for the Lakers job.
Yeah.
Friend of the podcast, JJ Redick, by the way. We don't accept any JJ Redick slander. Sorry.
That's all right.
He's come on this podcast. So let's talk about Budenholzer.
Yeah.
So I think I think we got to start just from a general standpoint. I do want to ask you about like the positives and negatives of Coach Budenholzer, but I think more than anything else, you probably have an overall positive view when looking back at Budenholzer's tenure, in that it ended with a championship, like a championship during your lifetime, which is something that the Suns are desperate for. And but I just, from your perspective, just from a general sense, when you look back on his time coaching the Bucks, what's your impression of him?
Yeah, I think a really, really good coach. I think it's funny. The thing that stands out the most, is not necessarily a basketball thing. he just tries to say as little as possible every time he's forced to speak publicly about the Bucks. It's really, and the Suns now, it's great. I've been asking, have they scheduled his intro presser yet? Is this even official yet?
It's not.
No,
it's
I don't
not
think
like
so,
100% official.
I can't.
The Suns didn't. The Suns did announce it. The Suns did announce it.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Official,
But yeah,
I can't wait.
press
Like
conference.
I want to watch the whole thing live. I really want to see if he's any different. Like
We're
my
gonna
favorite
play
moment,
random. That's the joke that's been going around.
No,
obviously.
that was one of those like they mic'd up the locker room. He would not say that on purpose to reporters. He would not give them that much. One time they asked him, I think it was a preseason game, and they made him talk during it, and they were like, "What do you like? What you're seeing from the squad? Like, what are they doing well?" And he just goes, "Yeah, they're really playing 5-on-5 out there." And it's like, yeah, that's literally every single game. Like, he doesn't want to say anything. Like it was his goal as the Bucks coach to like give as little as possible in a supportive way of his players. I will say one of my favorite things is like never a guy who would throw someone under the bus. I think always protective of his players to the media, which I think guys probably really appreciated about Bud, but just like doesn't give you a bunch about him, which I don't think is a negative. It's just like a funny thing, and says yeah, no a bunch. Like there's something very wholesome about Bud. But I think coaching wise, at the drop is something people talk a lot about. I'm sure we'll talk about, and he was certainly very devoted to the drop. I would say less so throughout his Bucks tenure. I think the influence of Drew Holiday and PJ Tucker helped a lot to get him to do some other things, mostly switching. But I think of Bud in like the most general terms, and it's like the architect of just systems that work really well. And I don't think he's great at adapting them, especially quickly. But I do think his number one strength is like he comes into a team, and he's done this 2 out of 2 times so far, and be like, this is exactly how we're going to play, and it's going to get the most out of everyone. And he did it with Atlanta, and obviously they couldn't beat LeBron.
Yeah.
You try beating LeBron with Paul Millsap and Al Horford, good luck. Like I think it was unreasonable to expect much more of what they did. And then in Milwaukee with the superstar, he was able to win one. I think his slowness to adapt probably cost them in some playoffs, but I think what he built there immediately turned them from like a 44, 45 win team to a 60 win team and got them in that stratosphere to begin with. So I think Bud to me is like builds things that really, really work and really trusts what he builds, which sometimes can be a negative or come off as a negative, but you've also got to admit the things that he builds are damn good.
Yeah, I mean, he literally elevated you guys to a new tier of playoff team. I don't want to say overnight. That's maybe disrespectful to Jason Kidd and whoever came before him. But
that's fair. You should be disrespectful to him.
Within 1 year.
It was overnight.
It was I mean, it was season to season. There was that much of a difference. I'm glad you mentioned Drew Holiday at a certain point, because one of the big things I want to ask you about, I think a difference between the Bud era Bucks versus the kind of, I don't want to say catastrophe, but some of the challenges that the current Suns have in their roster construction. You guys had in those teams between Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton and Giannis, I think a roster construction that made sense. You had these puzzle pieces that it didn't figure out. It didn't require a genius to figure out how to use them. That being said, whereas, obviously the Suns is the obvious contrast with Brad Beal, KD, and Devin Booker still trying to figure out how to optimize those pieces. How much credit do you give Bud throughout his era coaching the Bucks with being a taskmaster and kind of identifying roles for like your star players, but also your role players in particular, and really just like finding unique roles for each guy to fit into onto the team? Or do you really give a lot of that credit just to like good, proper roster construction on the part of the front office?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I think certainly Bud has his ideas about how players should play, and I think the Bucks overall just were, I think, pretty tight-lipped about things. But some of it would splash out, like the first season he was there, and I remember during that season we were so excited we thought they might win 50 games, which the Bucks hadn't done in forever, and then they won 60. So it really was like an immediate glow-up. But there was some push and pull with Chris Middleton, because Bud just didn't love the mid-rangers he was shooting, which that is so funny to share now going into this team.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm really like, just to skip right to the meat of it, the taskmaster stuff, like I think the role players are going to fall in line. Like Grayson Allen, he's built for this. He's been here literally. He's ready. I think the other guys, they'll fit in. I think Nurkic, if he's around, like, the tracking data says he did a good job defending within 6 feet of the rim. Like, I think he could adapt and be a useful piece in that Bud drop defense.
Do you think he'll shoot 400 threes next season if he's still on the Suns? Because he might need to.
It might be a goal. It might be a goal of his. But I think the relationships with the stars is going to make or break this for Bud, and would for probably any coach who came in there. And I have no idea how it's going to go. I'm fascinated because I think he had a good relationship with Giannis. Giannis has also caped for every coach the Bucks have ever had. Like, Giannis probably was like, man, do we have to replace Joe Prunty midseason? I feel like Joe was really hitting a stride. Like, he's on board with the coaches for better and certainly for worse. And I think, the Bucks overall, they haven't had these kind of stars who are, maybe as mercurial as we'll say some of the guys on the Phoenix Suns have been. So I think that's just going to be fascinating. And my number one thing to look for within that is actually probably going to be offensively, and it is going to be shooting threes. I mean, he, like, before the first Bucks seasons or in training camps, he would put these squares on the floor, and it's like, this is where you guys should stand if you're not in the action, if you're not on the ball. Like, we need to space the floor. You need to shoot from here. Somebody can be in the dunker spot, but, like, Suns example, like, if it's, I don't know, Booker and KD or, Booker and Nurkic, like, KD, you got to be in the corner. Like, this would be the equivalent. Obviously, there was no KD to put off the ball or no Beal to put off the ball. But I'm just so fascinated to see, like, what is the buy-in going to be and who's going to adapt more? Because I think the perfect Bud offense, it would be an action, and it would be, if the guards aren't in the action, they're way out spacing the floor, either in the corners or in the wings. And if it's Nurk is not in it, he's probably in the dunker. That's what Bud likes, is the dunker for the, just to have not just 3-point shooters around stuff. And we just know that's not how the Suns are played. So I'm really interested to see that. But defensively, you're thinking about the roster construction. I really want to see if they drop, and Bud loves drop, who's navigating these screens in their starting lineup. Like, does he task one of the stars to be this guy who runs over, dozens of screens per game? I don't know. Like, I see some things that make so much sense.
They're not
but then
really
I see
built
some
for
things
in their current form.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
Do you think Okogie could do that? I know he's not like a stamped starter by any means on the team.
He could, for sure. I mean, he has proven himself. I always joke about how Josh Okogie is he's inevitable. Like, you think he might finally be out of the league, and then he just finds a way with pure effort to play himself back into a rotation spot. So I love Josh Okogie. I think he has a player option, and I hope he comes back. But he's a complete zero on offense, and you just can't trust him if you actually intend to go anywhere in the playoffs.
Running around screens is one of the two things that he's good at, and the other one is offensive rebounds. So, like, that's just what's tough about him is how much do you sacrifice with putting him on the floor, especially in like the ideal scenario. Sam joked about it, but if somehow Nurkic could shoot 36% from 3 on 4 attempts per game or something, then maybe you can get away with it a little more of having Okogie on the floor. But with Nurkic not shooting threes, KD and Booker and Beal having to adjust maybe to shooting more threes, it's probable that they want another 3-point shooter in that spot. And it's a roster problem, though. It's not necessarily a Bud problem. Maybe that's the type of thing that they're going to try to figure out in this.
I would just add too, like, it's not just the fact that we would need Nurkic to shoot threes, Ty, but you mentioned like putting him in the dunker spot. That would be great if Nurkic wasn't maybe the worst finisher of all starting centers in the NBA. So he's
that
not
does
a guy.
Make it tougher.
And he can't jump.
He's just not a guy who carries any gravity around there.
Yeah. These things make it a little more difficult.
Well, I guess another thing I wanted to ask you about was sort of like put yourself in the mind of Bud, because another thing we've talked about is that he this is a guy who didn't need this job necessarily. Like, people talk about maybe the Suns got the best guy they could, and I think there are a lot of fans who are strangely disappointed in this hire. I think given that how volatile this position currently is within the organization, them actually getting Bud is, I'm not going to call it a miracle, but I think it's a great hire given that how many coaches we've fired lately. So if you were Bud and you have a great resume and you're still in your mid-50s and you could maybe sit out for another season, but it's kind of interesting just to think about what his options actually were that were available this summer. It's like, would you rather take the super, super high pressure job in Phoenix? And he got a 5-year deal, so good for him. But it's this really high pressure job with these superstars who, like, I'm sure if everything works out, it's going to be a dream job, but are our superstars maybe uncoachable? Who knows? Versus if he had gone to like Charlotte, and it's like you try and start over with a completely different franchise where like half the job is teaching a bunch of 22-year-olds just to be professionals, and it's just like maybe a completely different level. Like what do you think would motivate him more between those options?
I think he was going to go somewhere good. I mean, when he came to Milwaukee, it was because Atlanta was basically like, we run the chorus with this, Horford, Millsap, Teague, et cetera, team. Like, we're going to rebuild. And Bud was pretty much just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like, let me out of the contract. I want to go win. Like, I think Bud wants to win a lot. I mean, I think you mentioned it. He's in his mid-50s. He's had 2 Coach of the Years, 2 different franchises, won a title. Like, I think he's like 39th right now in overall wins. Like, I think this is a guy who's probably sitting here like, I want to go down as one of the all-time, or maybe he just wants to win it right now. He has a chance to go down as one of the, winningest, most accomplished coaches in NBA history.
Yeah.
So I think he was always going to go somewhere. Like, I don't think he was taking the Charlotte job. It's kind of poetic. His former lead assistant, or one of the lead assistants, Charles Lee, I think, got that job. For me, when Lakers opened up, I was like, man, that's tough. Darvin Ham, another former Bud assistant, didn't do well there. But I thought, with like Bud, his sometimes lack of flexibility on offense, I was like, well, LeBron button kind of fixes a lot of that. He could do a lot of fun defensively with Anthony Davis. The Cleveland job has been talked about for a long time. If JB Bickerstaff gets fired, we'll see. But again, that's one where like the defensive personnel, especially with the bigs, you can see some pretty fun symmetry there with what Bud likes to do. I didn't really expect him to go for the Phoenix job. I think, the 5th year and obviously the very competitive financial offer helped make it happen. Mm-hmm. But he's got to like the situation too. Like, I don't think this is the Monty Williams where like he would have just been done unless they came across with the crazy bag. I think this is a job he wanted, and then, Bud played his hand, right? Just like where the Bucks were in with Doc Rivers, like, you're in a bad spot. I'm one of the more accomplished coaches around at this juncture. If you want me, it's going to cost, so good for him. But I think he certainly looked at this group. I mean, from Bud's personal experience, went up against Devin Booker in the finals, had a very difficult time beating him. I mean, they obviously ended up winning, but were down 2-0 at one point. Went up against KD that same playoffs, and despite both of the co-stars getting hurt in some fashion throughout the series, we're so close to losing to Durant in that series. Like, part of me really wonders if this job for Bud is like, I want to be on the other side of Kevin Durant going forward.
Yeah,
I went up against the guy. I didn't enjoy it. Like, I want the KD on my side this time. And if I instill my defense and everything, maybe we can just grind out and win, even if I can't get these guys to shoot threes. But I think he is very motivated to win. And there was like, I thought Bucks fans too were like, maybe he's not even going to coach because like, it was reported he might take the Nets job and then didn't. And I was like, dude, I think the Nets would have to give Bud $20 million a year. Nobody wants that job. Like, Bud wants to win. And I think he feels like he can certainly do it. And also, it's home. I think that matters too.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to mention that too. He's from here, and I imagine that motivated him. Don't get me wrong. $10+ million a year for a coach is not something you can move. You could really turn down. Not to mention that goes pretty far. It's easy to be rich in Phoenix. I'll just say that it goes pretty far.
Atlanta,
here.
Milwaukee,
and also,
Phoenix.
Look,
he's a smart man.
It's easy to be rich in any of those places. To be honest.
Yeah, he's not L.A. where $10 million doesn't go as far as Phoenix.
Also,
right?
is he getting $10 million in L.A.? I mean, like, I don't think the Lakers could have afforded
they don't have
him
other
now.
jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only reason the owners of the Lakers are rich is because they own the Lakers.
Yeah.
They don't have money. They'd have to sell the team to have money. It's not like they own a mortgage business like the Suns owner does. And he's probably looking at Kevin Durant and thinking, if he doesn't like me, what are they going to do? Give him a 7th coach in the last 5 years?
An entirely fair criticism. I mean, and also just, I think Ty was hitting at it, but so here's a guy who's top 40 all time in wins, regular season wins as a coach already. And he's established this entire resume, and yet he waltzes into this job, and from day one, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are the 2nd and 3rd best player he's ever coached as a head coach. So, I mean, that's no disrespect to Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday, Ty, but, I think obviously there's a lot of top-end potential. You just need to be able to tap into what those guys can actually do, and we'll see if they buy in.
Yeah. What do you think about the reason it seems like he was fired from Milwaukee? If you asked like a radio host, a sports radio host, right? They would say playoff adjustments, right? That's how they would answer, right? That seems like the thing that everyone points at. how much of a problem do you think that is for Bud?
I think it is it's a factor. I think the reason he got fired was I think he had just kind of lost the resonation with the group over all the years, and unfortunate things kept happening in the playoffs. I mean, I don't want to be like the Bucks cope guy. It's worth mentioning that there's two flameouts with Bud the last 2 years. No Chris at all against the Celtics, and they lose in 7, and then Giannis gets hurt, and they lose to Miami in the first round. At the play-in team is the 1 seed. Obviously, you can't do that anyway. Jimmy Butler just goes scorched earth, yada yada. But it's worth the context too of sharing that Bud's brother had passed away soon before the playoffs. Like, should he have even been coaching all of those games? I think is a real question. Like, I'm sure it was extremely difficult. But there were comments after the Bucks had made the move, I think from like Bobby Portis and Jay Crowder for some reason. Like, I don't know why Jay Crowder felt the need to weigh in. But
if any player has audacity, it's Jay Crowder. We both know that now.
Yeah.
When's his podcast coming? That's probably around the corner.
Oh, dear God. All Caps podcast do not sound
Get him
pleasant.
on Blue Wire, Ty.
We will take boss man, I've said some bad things about you, but if you want to start the pod, I will still have that convo.
Podman99. I can see it now.
We've been calling him the intern lately. But I think like the culture, I think it was called like a country club culture. I just think it's hard to go that long and have that level of success at one point and then not, and for things to just keep going. And I felt like the Bucks just probably needed a reset at that point. And I just think it's really rare for coaches to last a long time in the league, right? Like, there's Kerr, Spoelstra, Pop obviously is kind of an exception, but most of the time, between 5 and 10 years, that's a really long tenure for any head coach. It's just kind of the way things go. I do think, if you knew for sure you were getting Dame, do you maybe stick it out another year and see potentially? But I do think it had just kind of run its course, and the adjustments thing was real. I think, from not switching enough the first 2 years, not putting Giannis on Kawhi in 2019, 2020, I think they were better. That's when they started to switch. 22, I just don't know if he had great options, but there was a lot of like Grayson Allen getting cross-matched on a Tatum that was just allowed to happen a lot, and that did not go well for Milwaukee. And then in the Heat series, it was really not doubling Jimmy much at all, and Drew just clearly couldn't guard him. I mean, Jimmy somehow, I don't know how he just like barely shows up in the regular season, just decides to solve one of the best defenders in the world for 5 games, but he certainly did it. And, they don't really put Giannis on him. He was hurt anyway that series, but not doubling him at all. Like, stuff like that will, or has at least come up for Bud. But again, I think it's so core to him that he has these systems that he really believes in, he really builds, he really gets the buy-in for. And I think he struggles with like, all right, now we have to throw that away because we're playing Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and we just can't do it anymore for this 6 games, even though we've just done it for 2 years, right? Like, I think it's that there's an inherent difficulty there. So I think it's a real thing. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch, and I also really want to see who are the assistants going to be. Like, can you find someone who can bring a little bit of that? That's my new number one like indie question for all these hires is, okay, who's the second guy? Who's the third guy? Like, can you balance that out a little bit? But yeah, I think.
Do you have Darvin Ham opinions? Are you a Darvin Ham fan?
Everyone in Milwaukee loved him. It's so funny.
It's hard to know when you're like rooting for an assistant, right? Like, and then you become the head guy and everyone hates you. But also, Lakers fans hate everyone, so I don't even know. They hated Frank Vogel too.
I think it could be one of those too. Like, there's guys, I think NFL is where you can see this clearest just because they actually define the roles. They have to, of offense and defense, and the NBA that you don't really, and I think that you switch between them more. But like, there's some coordinators who can't be head coaches, right? Like, I think Darvin Ham was a good assistant coach, and if he came back to work with Bud, I think that'd be a great hire for Phoenix. Like, I think he did good things. I think one of actually the most important things that we for sure knew Darvin did is I think he fostered a lot of those player connections. I think Darvin had a better time of doing that and was able to be kind of a bridge between Bud and the rest of the staff and the players. And I think in a situation like this, for sure, that could be really valuable. Like, I don't think it's coincidental that we got these kind of quotes about maybe a disconnect or just like shifting culture. after the year where Darvin Ham was no longer on the Bucs staff and that bridge was kind of lost. But yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, the Bucs just got rid of a few coaches. I think maybe only Sidney Dobner had served under Bud too, but there's kind of a land grab now between Lee and Bud for some of these former assistants who are floating around, and I'm really intrigued to see who goes where at this point.
Yeah, he's got a lot of assistants. I mean, I haven't looked through all the names, but he's got 10 years of guys worth to go through. So it's supposedly a long list, I guess, of guys that he could call.
And maybe an unlimited checkbook.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we saw how that worked with Kevin Young, Mike, and then, Suns fans. You talk about fans liking the assistant coach. Ty, the problem with the Suns last year actually was, there were a couple of reports that Kevin Young, who became the highest paid assistant in the league so that the Suns could retain him, there were a couple of reports out there that they were keeping Kevin Young intentionally so that he could sort of design the offense in an offensive coordinator type way. And then, of course, throughout the actual season, we never really got verification of if that was actually true. But because of that one report, and I don't remember who originally said it in the summer, and because of obvious reasons of how the Suns' offense looked all season long, fans just started slinging so much shit at this guy who I don't even know.
At an assistant.
And ultimately,
the new BYU
he's now
coach.
They
oh, that's right.
Suns fans chased him out of the league. No, I don't think it was that extreme, but
that's
it
a similar
can be tough.
thing. The Bucs got rid of Josh Oppenheimer, who had lasted through 3 different coaches, and the one thing that any Bucs fan knew about him was that he was apparently, at least at one point, the Giannis shooting coach. And the amount of heinous things
you do not want to be that guy.
Oh,
you do
no.
not.
They were finally everyone's Giannis is going to shoot 80% from free throw next year. They finally got rid of this guy. So yeah, I think it is funny how we get these itty bitty morsels of info, and it just becomes the whole book on these guys when we know so little about what they actually do. We don't
know shit. We really don't know shit. But it's fun to speculate, and both of us are guilty of it, I guess. I'm so excited when I evaluate this hire for the Suns, and I know you're iffy on the fit, and I think that's entirely
I'm coming
valid.
around a little bit. Part of me thinks I wonder if I would have said this about almost anyone they hired. So it's why not get the best coach then and just try and figure it out, right? I do think he's a great coach.
They've been aimless for this entire season. Frank Vogel came in last year and said that they were going to be this defensive focused team that was scrappy as hell. And I think in a lot of ways they set up Frank Vogel to fail with a roster that just didn't have the personnel to execute the way that he wanted them to as well. But with Bud, my thing is I think he has this clear vision. He has this identity that he can give you. I'm so excited to see them hopefully try to embrace that identity. I'm worried if they actually can. And so much of it hinges on the 5-man. How instrumental Brook Lopez was for the entire Milwaukee run, to allow you guys to play the drop defense, for him to be the floor spacer that he was. So much of it, I mean, there's the issue with our stars not shooting enough threes, for sure. That's a real thing. I yell about it all the time. But just, can Nurkic even be, 70% of what Brook was doing in that role for Milwaukee? I'm not so sure. And that's why that's also, one of the main guys I've circled of a position that might need to change hands.
And
also, what would you want for Brook Lopez?
It's such a funny crossroads, man, because there's Bucs fans who have been ready to move on from Brook, and especially, they match up with the Pacers, which is the worst possible matchup for Brook, and he didn't have a great time in that series. I mean, the box score numbers are okay. The rebounds weren't good enough, and obviously, it's just a matchup problem. I mean, they were going topping at the 5 just to make life hard on Brook, and newsflash, life is hard when you're 35 years old and 7 feet tall and 260 pounds, and it's this young, fast team that's just running on you. But I for years now have been how do you move on from him? Because he's a core part of the team's identity. I mean, a little less so now, post-Bud, and, now that in the Dame era when the spacing is plentiful and defensive athletes are so much more important than they were before. But it's you look around the league, I mean, there's just not many guys who do the Brook Lopez stuff, right? True.
Almost none.
Miles Turner, who until this year I thought was worse, and this year has had an incredible playoffs, and I assume it's going to be very difficult, if impossible, for anyone to trade for him. And then it's I was going through the last couple drafts because a lot of Bucs fans are oh, how have they never drafted a new stretch 5? And I was I don't think they could have gotten Wembanyama, And that's pretty much it the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you would think that
Chet,
there would be
yeah.
more. You really would think that there would be more of those guys like 25 under as we talk about the rest of the... Because, every wing has to come out of the draft with the ability to potentially play up at the 4 or 5 and shoot threes now. But at the center position, there aren't as many as you would think. One guy that I've dreamed about for a long time is Wendell Carter Jr. If Orlando ever decided to move on from him, I think he could fit the role really well. But I don't think they're going to move on from him. He's a capable starting center already, and they're a playoff team. There are not a ton of options, to your point. Bol, if we wanted to make Bol a full-time starting 5, but the problem is Bol just blocks shots. That doesn't mean he actually could protect the rim as a center. He can't do it. So,
dude, Bud might be a little tempted. I mean, it's you end up at Mo Bamba of the list real quickly, and nobody wants to end up with Mo Bamba.
I am unironically excited if the Suns sign Mo Bamba. Not if they start him. They cannot start Mo Bamba, but I do think he is unironically a Bud type of player, so that would be fun. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, do the Suns have any picks this year?
Yes. And we're going to trade it, but I don't want to. I don't want to, but yes, we have picks.
There's this year's pick. They were able to get Kevin Durant without trading this year's pick.
Oh, that's right.
As of the draft day, they can trade the 2031 pick, which is crazy to say out loud, but yeah.
I think the Bucks are in the same
probably
boat.
The Bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Lakers.
You think Portland would give us Duop Reith? I'm looking at centers who shoot threes right now. Could Duop Reith be the next starting center of the Phoenix Suns?
Yeah, sign him. I'll take him.
He might actually be
I saw those net rating numbers in Portland.
He might be too old for your core. Duop Reith is an old guy for where he's at and his place in the league. It's a good year for stretch fives in the draft actually. So I'm really going to be looking closely at what the Bucks do because they have 23 and 33. Again, you guys got to hold that pick from the KD trade. I don't know how Portland didn't take back their own second in this year with the Dame trade. I still don't really understand that part of it, but I'm not going to complain. But Kel Ware out of Indiana, Deron Holmes, who's a little smaller, but there's some of these guys who can actually shoot and have real size that are very interesting. But again, I think if Milwaukee took one, you'd want to just hold on to Brook Lopez and, kind of have that transitional year. I don't think either of these teams want to draft a guy and start him as a stretch 5. That seems pretty fraught. So that and the screen navigator are the two things I look for on this Suns roster. And I'm maybe Nurkic can play the Lopez role to some extent. Obviously there's question marks on both ends, offense included. The screen navigation thing is a huge question mark.
Yeah.
One thing I like is, Bud loved to use Giannis as kind of the free safety, put him on a non-threatening wing and keep him around the rim too. And that's how the Bucks were really able to make it. So all right, you're just never really going to score at the rim. You need to hit jumpers, and some teams will, but it's hard, and you win a lot of games in the regular season, especially if you can just never let anyone get to the rim. I actually think KD could do a pretty good job in that Giannis role of just also being all right, you go ignore Aaron Gordon, and Nurkic, you ignore whoever else. Denver's a bad example. There's not many guys to ignore. But right, that idea of
OKC or someone, I don't know. If you're playing a team that just has, and a lot of teams, to your point, can do this. They can get away with it during the regular season and then, rotations tighten up in the playoffs. But yeah, any team that has one non-shooter out there on the perimeter, you just ignore that guy and put Nurkic on him or put KD on him. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're going to have to start Bol too. Just put two guys out there that can do it. Let them roam. Have Bol at power forward, KD at small forward. Just play the largest and longest lineup we could possibly have. Hey, since we did the whole first half of this podcast was talking about the idea of potentially trading Kevin Durant, I have to ask you one last question. Are you interested in a Damian Lillard for Kevin Durant trade?
No. Brook Lopez for KD, we could workshop, but I'm good on. A lot of respect for Kevin Durant, man, but Dame will shoot threes, and I think that's a very important thing the Bucks have learned to go next to Giannis. So,
all right, Ty, what's your Twitter handle?
That is at Ty Windisch, TIWINDISCH.
All right, and check out the podcast, the Eurostep podcast on the Blue Wire Network. Anything else that you'd like to plug, Ty?
No, all the links are at gspn.info, but yeah, we will probably be scouting out the same young stretch fives and screen navigation guys because the Bucks need a whole new set of talent too. So, fans can listen to both of our scouting reports as we try and find these very cheap diamonds in the rough this summer.
Appreciate you joining us, Ty. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
If you're interested, you can join us at patreon.com/thetimeline, an extra podcast every week. And you can join our Discord there. Check us out.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.